to just start a church or to start a small group or a Bible study and then invite God into that is completely different than being like, this is what I do on my day-to-day basis. This is me in the marketplace. This is me at my job. This is me at my home. This is me at my kid's soccer game, whatever it is. And this is me bringing Jesus into that space. I think that that's something that so few Christians, I think we've like lost the ability to do that, because I think we're supposed to create kingdom culture everywhere that we go. And I think that a lot of times that can feel almost unnatural, because like, well, what if I'm too preachy? What if they don't like me? And we've almost embraced this form of evangelism that is like, we say that we don't want to offend people and we just want to love them, want to see something different. But what that really means is, I'm just going to be nice. I'm not going to bring Jesus into my workplace. And I'm just going to hope that people notice a difference so I don't have to like talk about Jesus, right? Or I don't have to. Right. But when you're actually living in a way that is countercultural, when you're actually showing up for people, when you're actually like meeting needs outside of just what's there in the workplace, when you're seeing them outside of just those four walls, I think there's something really powerful that happens, because I think that that's when people stop feeling like, to you, there's some project, right?
Right.
What they start really feeling is, they're like, man, this is a human being who sees me and values me and cares about me. And I think that's the first thing that kind of creates the soil for you to be able to even speak into their lives, right? To even have an opinion about that. And I see you doing that. Obviously, now we go to the same church, and I feel like our paths have crossed more and more.
Sure.
And I've heard, like, even from the pastor, the role you've played in his life, I feel like you've become so intentional of actually walking with people. Is that something that you feel like is it natural for you? Is that a thing that you just kind of do on your own? Is that a thing that just you feel like God's challenged you to do that? Is it take an effort to do that?
Well, first of all, it sounds way more magnificent than it seems in my mind. But thanks. Thanks for that. No, it's just the path that I'm on. It's a journey that I've been on. I think I have spent most of my life not being that person.
Yeah.
And so in my journey is learning to be more intentional.
Yeah.
To be more present.
Yeah.
I think in life we tend to forget how important it is, whether it's with your family or your kids or your work, just being present.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm at.
So what creates that shift then? What is it? Like you said, it doesn't come naturally. So how do you go from, this is not a natural thing for me, to now all of a sudden you're like this person that every one of your employees, every person at this church, like everyone's like, dude, like Trent is a guy who sees people. Like how do you go from that not being natural to now you're like, and maybe you don't even notice it, which is hilarious.
Well, and I don't think I do notice it, but I've also been very intentional to my mindset of being, I think I read a thing one time that said that you have to be careful of what you say, because your mind doesn't know that you're joking. So if you say something about yourself, I'm not very good at this, well, your body's going to believe it, because if your body doesn't know whether you're joking or not, because it's only understanding the words that you cast out.
Yeah.
Well,
almost it's taking it as fact.
Yeah, as fact. And so I believe the same thing happens in our lives with people around us. I think what we think is what we become. And what we say is what we're held accountable to.
Yeah.
So I've really just tried to focus on how can things go in my life if I quit worrying about me.
Yeah. Dang. Well, it's crazy. It sounds, the way you're saying that sounds so simple, but I think that's the thing, is that it is. Like, I think we overcomplicate.
It's so much more simpler than we think.
Well, and we read this devotion called My Utmost for His Highest. I don't know if you ever heard of this, by Oswald Chambers. Old school devotional, and they've made some new versions of it through the years. But he talks a lot about this idea of living your life in such a way where you are engaged with God consistently, right? Like you're getting up, you're praying, you're in your word, you're engulfing yourself in community of people reminding you of who Jesus is. And he talks about how like the ministry that we do actually should be ministry that we're not even aware of, right? Like that should be happening. There should be employees who are just talking great about you, and you don't know because you didn't try. You don't step in work and say, how can I make sure everyone has good things to say about me? How can I make sure that I change everyone's life here, right? Yeah. It's almost like when you are living connected to Jesus, that just kind of starts being the overflow, right? As people start feeling seen and loved and noticed and cared for. And what I love about this Devo is it really does talk about how someday we should be standing in heaven and there should be people there who are giving these accounts of how we changed their lives. And we didn't know because we weren't trying, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's not bad to start a ministry or a church or a Bible study or a small group. But a lot of times when you're stepping into those arenas, you're like, okay, what do I say that's going to make people different? What do I say that's going to challenge people? What do I say that's going to make them, their drug addiction go away or their depression go away? Rather than thinking, in my life, how do I love Jesus? How do I know Jesus? How do I let him transform my attitude? How do I let him transform my desires? And like you just said, what sounds overly simple almost is the idea of, I'm just going to do my best to see God, to create a lifestyle where I value people, where I tell myself that people are important because what I think and believe, my entire existence receives it as fact. And so if I remind myself that people matter and I live in that way, all of a sudden you start to create impact, not even realizing that you're creating impact. And that's I feel like as I'm talking to you now, you have no idea that people love you so much.
I hadn't even really thought about any of that until just now. And I'm processing probably 90 miles an hour, just sitting there thinking about what you're saying. And I will say that I agree, because the last thing that we should ever use for motivation is, what do we get in return?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that I remember reading one time too about, if we lived our lives in expectation of, if we give gifts expecting the response to be what we want it to be, we're going to be always disappointed. And so, because everybody responds differently. Yeah. And that I think that if you wanted it to be easy, it goes to what you're saying is that you got to do it without expectation of wanting anything in return. The last thing I think about is, what does somebody think about me, or what am I going to get out of this? Because it's not about that. It's never. I think that's a big release to that.
Well, it's crazy because even as you're saying this, I'm thinking it's almost like sometimes it seems the less you try, the more of an impact you're able to make. Possibly, because it's almost like if you go into a place, into a conversation, into an establishment, into a room full of people, with a thing in your brain of like, I'm going to go in here, I'm going to say this thing, this is going to be the outcome, I'm going to provoke change, and I'm going to leave. You're putting all this pressure on yourself to create this outcome, right? To say the right thing. Now it's all on you and your performance, because you're not going in thinking, how do I see these people? How do I make them feel loved and valued? How do I hear them? How do I listen to them? You're thinking, how do I go in and become the answer to their problems? How do I go in and become the solution to this space? Which now all of a sudden you're putting yourself in the place of God in a way, right? And even though you might be thinking, how can God use me? You're still going in with like so much of a plan as to what you are going to do to provoke change. And then you go in there and people don't respond the way that you had hoped, or they don't respond the way you thought. And now you go out feeling defeated, which means now you start going and strategizing how you can make a greater impact next time, rather than just being the kind of person who like sees humans, but just being the kind of person who sees the people you're in the room with.